one. This is last of the series of Elijah, the prophet, which includes 2 Kings 1 and 2, chapter 1 and 2. I was going to say this, that there's so much in this storyline and also the relationship between Elijah and Elijah. And so that's what I'll be getting into next. And, Elijah had a double portion of his spirit. And what he had to do, what I'm covering in this video, is what he had to do to obtain a double portion of the spirit of Elijah. So and this is just a paraphrase, but if we're going from glory to glory, even by the Spirit of the Lord, and what is required of us to obtain such a, even though we're by grace through faith, we have a responsibility to abide in our calling and to pursue the Lord with all of our heart, might, and soul. And you see that in the life of Elijah, where he pursued after Elijah until he got a double portion of his spirit. Now, he did not have to, he did not have to go to Mount Carmel and dwell and eat from the ravens but a lot of the things in Elijah's life, he did parallel, like the widow woman and all. And he definitely had a double portion of the miracles for raising the dead and stuff. So here's the thing. I see that from the spirit of Elijah to Elisha, to John the Baptist, and to the last move of the Spirit, we're going to see the greatest manifestation of Elijah in the earth that we've ever seen, because God, the spirit of Elijah is the one that's going to bring, the Christ back to reign in the earth. And the thing is it has to precede him, even as it did the first time with John the Baptist. So, I'm looking forward to what God might say to me while I do the series on John the Baptist and all. But also, afterwards, what I'm going to do is something I've longed to do, and I believe I have permission to do. And that is to expound how the manifestation of Elijah is going to be in the earth and how we're going to see it. And I know for sure I've trained all my life for this day, for this hour, for this season, for this time. And I know the remnant and the eagles and the prophets and prophetess have likewise. So, it's all or nothing. But anyway, let me get into this. I'll go to how it starts out here. Okay, so in 2 Kings chapter 1, Ahaziah fell through the lattice in the upper chamber and in Samaria and was sick. And he sent messengers and say unto him, Go and inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, whether I should recover from this disease. And the king sent and you know the story. And basically, Elijah tells the king, hey, you're not going to recover. You're going to surely die. Now, who would want to bring such a word, And the king sent, because he was angry, he sent a captain of 50 and a company of 50 to really to destroy Elijah. But Elijah knew it. and said, if I be a servant of God, let fire come down and consume your 50 and the captain. And it did. Then the king sent another company of 50 and his 50. And the same thing happened. But on the third time, the captain of the 50, he bowed down to Elijah and said, make my life precious in your sight. Don't destroy me and my company of 50. And Elijah got the word of the Lord from the angel of the Lord and said, okay, I'll go, But then, here's the thing. Because this captain of the 50 and 50, humbled himself before God and did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, nothing happened to him. But as far as the king died according to the word of Elijah the prophet. And in chapter 2 of 2 Kings, this is a time when Elijah is going to be taken from the companies of prophets that Elijah had in Shiloh, and I want to go over the 4 places. He went from Gilgal. He's going to leave, and all the prophets had got words of knowledge. Hey, didn't you hear that the master, Elijah, is going to be leaving our house today? Yes, we heard that, right? But where did he go, and why out of all those prophets, why was it only Elijah had such a determination to get something from Elijah? But he did. And Gilgal is the first place that he went. And Gilgal means a circle of stones. Just get that in your spirit, a circle of stones, Gilgal, right? And then he removes from Gilgal and he went to Bethel, which means a house of God. And then he went to Jericho, which means actually fragrance or the moon city. Then he went to Jordan, which means flowing down and to descend. And Elijah took his mantle and he wrapped it together and he smote the waters with his mantle. And of course, the waters of the Jordan separated and they went over both of them on dry land. And then Elijah turns to Elijah and said, What do you require? What do you want from me? And Elijah, of course, says, let a double portion of his spirit be upon me. And he said, you asked a hard thing. Notice it's a hard thing. I'm telling you what. The harder the task, the greater the reward. That's all I can say. It's like hid treasure. If you're going to go and gold mine and you're going to dig down, you're going to have to go real deep if you're going to find that. You might find a nugget in the stream somewhere of gold, but if you want a vein of gold, you're going to have to dig deep. And so it is. Wisdom is like a hid treasure, right? So God puts the task. I am telling you what, one thing I am sure about all prophets that I've ever met in my life, and I've met a lot, is they go through hell. They get tested, they get tried, here Elijah, he got tested 4 times just to be with him, just to go over to the Jordan. And even after this happens and the chariots of fire and the horses thereof, and he goes up and he says, the one thing I require, so notice every single step is something is required of him. In this case, if you see me when I go up, you'll get it. But if you do not see me when I go up, you will not get it. So can you see the big if statement for those that are computer experts? I am telling you, man, if you want to receive anything from the Lord, you're going to have to do what he says. And God, the closer you get to God, remember, straight is the gate and narrow is the way that leads to life eternal, and few there be to find it. It's not a multitude. In this case, it's one man. There was 100 prophets viewing afar off, and yet, why did they view afar off and not desire more? I am telling you, one of the things I am sure about as far as revelation is hunger. Do you hunger and thirst for the revelation of Jesus Christ? And if you do, you're going to have to seek him, and you're going to have to seek him with all your heart if you're going to find him. And the more you seek him, and the more you ask, and the more you desire, and the more you use your faith and without wavering, the more you're going to get downloaded. You're going to get the revelation. But you're going to be also tested, no different than Elijah or Elijah. And so he sees him when he goes up, and the mantle of Elijah fell from the chariots of fire and the horses, and he picked it up. Now, get this. This is another thing that the body of Christ, the prophetic ones, the eagles, got to go through this transformation from the old wineskin to the new. And what does he have to do? Elijah, this is a perfect example of it. Elijah rents his clothes and he took off the mantle that he had up to that point, and then he took up the mantle of Elijah, the prophet. But that didn't activate anything until he activated by faith when he went over to the waters of the Jordan, and he took that mantle and he smote the waters, and he said, "Where is the God of the prophet Elijah?" When he smote it with faith, and that action point divided the waters of the Jordan. He went over in dry land, and I see this contention even in verse 23 when Elijah, there was these children, and they said they were mocking Elijah by saying about the bald head, and they said it 2 times, which is always different. When you say something twice in a row, and you see that a lot lately, here on Facebook, but when you see God speaking to Samuel, and he said, "Samuel, Samuel," God doesn't stutter, but why did he say it twice? Or "Verily, verily, I say to you," right? It's one of those deals, right? It's way more important than just saying it once, right? It's a covenant type of wording. And anyway, but in the negative, it works the same as in the positive. The holiness of God, it works one way, but the devil and the way these false prophets say, baldy, baldy, these children that mocked Elijah, he said the Spirit came upon him, and he said, let 2 she-bears come out of the woods and devour these 42 children. And it was done according to the word of Elisha, right? And God spoke to me, and he said, "Jerry, did you notice that it was 42 children? Why do you think that they put the 42 children in there?" And I had that gut feeling. I knew. And then I passed it by my wife, and she knew. And I was like, oh boy, this thing is going to play out again. Because what happens is when this thing gets too far away from God, how does God bring it back? How does God bring about, when in that day, in the day of Ahab and Jezebel and the false prophets, and they were, slaying the children, as a sacrifice. Of course, they were doing it nicely, and they were sacrificing these children unto the god, their god, Balaam, right? And here's the thing. We do it, and we don't even blink. We've gotten to the story. We would kill 9-month-old babies in the womb and not even think about it. There's like millions of them. They did probably thousands, and we did millions, right? So how does God steer the body of Christ back to where its origin, back to where this intimacy with God and the fear of God? And how do I know one thing, that God is going to use the gift of miracles and signs and wonders to Kuber the whole body of Christ back. And a lot of people, I believe 50% of them won't go, okay? And all the different parables of Jesus, and all the different things in Matthew 24 where it says, two of them will be this, or it'll say 5 were wise and five were foolish. It's always 50%. One will be in the field, one will be taken. 50%. So we got a long, long ways to go, and we're going to need God in power and demonstration of the Spirit, even as it was with Elijah and Elijah. We have to have the demonstration of the Spirit. And some of it is not positive. And some people say, well, we're in the New Testament. God is a God of love. He ain't going to do that. Well, how good has the sloppy agape gotten us to this point? It's gotten us so far away from God that he doesn't even dwell in the midst anymore. We don't even have reverence for him or fear of him. And he will restore the fear of the Lord and the God. He is a jealous God, and he's jealous over us with the godly jealousy, and he has espoused us to one husband, that we would be a chaste virgin of Christ. And one husband means we're not going to mingle with the other gods of the land. He's going to strip us with the false gods, and there's going to be a purity and a holiness before the Lord with his people. And anyway, so this kind of summarizes Elijah the prophet, and I pick up with Elijah, and the stories of Elijah and how they paralleled Elijah the prophet, because remember, he had a double portion of his spirit, and it's very much like remember when Moses put his spirit, the prophetic spirit that he carried, on 70 elders. He said, pick able men that are able, well able, and hate covetousness and all. And he did it. And then afterwards, his little saying that says, do we wish that all God's people were prophets? And Moses was kind of upset with the whole thing, because he didn't see it panning out the way he thought it would. And the reason for it is these guys just got the mantle without the hardship. If that makes any sense. I mean, Moses paid a price of 40 years in the wilderness just to go to speak to Pharaoh. But these other guys, they didn't have anything. They weren't tested, they weren't tried, they didn't have that same intimacy with God. It's the intimacy and the fear of God that keeps us. But anyway, I thank you for listening, and until the next one, may God bless.